Hi everyone, it's Laurie. I hope this video finds you all well. I wanted to come on and do a brief tutorial video about a product that is called fanning powder. And I've been using this with my tarot cards for a while now. And people have asked, how to use it and expressed some interest in it. So I thought I would just do a short video showing you how I use it. I thought I'd demonstrate it so that you can see how easy it is and maybe try some for yourself. So fanning powder is a powder that's typically used by magicians and professional card players to make a sticky deck slide very, very easily and make it very, very slick and slippery. I bought this from Amazon. It came just like this in this kind of, a strange looking, looks like a prescription bottle. It says fanning powder on it. It was actually shipped in a plastic zip bag in a piece of bubble, or in a bubble wrap envelope. And it's just it's not a safety lid, it's just a regular lid. And it's a jar full of this white powder that looks and feels very much like cornstarch or corn flour, but it is not. This is not cornstarch. It's not cornstarch, it's not talcum powder. It is a very specific chemical compound, something that's especially fine and slippery. So you need to get this, use this, don't use something else. And this bottle was about $7 or $8 in America, US Amazon Prime. And I imagine it's probably less than that in a magic shop. Okay, so one of the things I want to mention straight off is that if you have breathing problems or asthma, I would recommend that maybe you not do this because it's a very fine particulate, or that you take precautions with some kind of a mask or a ventilator or something like that. If you don't have that problem, you certainly don't need a ventilator. It's not a caustic or hazardous material as far as anything I've ever seen. As long as you use it in a well-ventilated room, I don't see what the problem would be. Naturally, you wouldn't want to inhale it or ingest it in any way. You wouldn't want to rub your eyes with your fingers. You wouldn't want to stick your fingers in your mouth. You wouldn't want your pets to sniff it, or children. Obviously all the normal disclaimers here. Common sense disclaimers. Also, I like to lay down an old bath towel. In my experience, if it does get on clothing or anything like that, it washes right out. It doesn't seem to stain. That's been my experience, but I haven't tested it. I haven't tried using it on someone's velvet sofa. And I wouldn't recommend doing that, so I don't know if it'll come out or not. So what you do need is a surface to work on, like a towel. You will need something for wiping the fanning powder off. I usually just use a dishcloth. This one is hand knit. You also need something for poofing the fanning powder onto the cards. When I first started, I would just use a tissue crumpled up into a little poof, either from that side or from the edge side. Poof, 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 like that. Lately, I have discovered something that's called a kabuki brush, as in kabuki theater. This is made by Elf Cosmetics, and I think it was maybe $1.99 at the drugstore. It was not very expensive. A kabuki brush is not like a regular makeup brush with stiff bristles. These bristles are so soft, they're like kitten fur. So this is the other kind of brush that I would recommend. If you're not going to use something like this, then definitely you're going to want to use your crinkled up tissue. I'm going to use the Astara Tarot, which I bought recently. So I did open the box, open the package, and I counted the cards to make sure they were all there, but other than that I haven't used the deck. But one of the things I did notice when I counted it is it's crazy sticky. The cards were sticking together. I've had some that are even worse than this. Hay House oracles tend to be extremely sticky, and what happens is when the cards are highly laminated and very sticky, sometimes they'll stick together, particularly in highly humid areas, so then they'll chip more easily, or they may even rip or tear. And it's much nicer to use cards that slip and slide. What I do is I get my surface and then I lay out cards. And it doesn't matter if you do them face up or face down, but I do stick to one or the other. And I typically will lay out about, I don't know, half of a deck, so 30 some cards. These are stuck together. but I'm just going to do a small amount here for the demo. So the first way, if you don't have the kabuki brush, the very first way is just taking the lid off and just starting to sprinkle some of the powder lightly on the cards. Let's see if you can see it going on. You'll see it, I think, more on the, there we go, see on the dark card there. So I'm just sprinkling some powder lightly on the cards. I've tried some different things like a T-ball, a metal T-ball, to use sort of as a sieve to kind of sieve them across, but it actually uses much too much. You just don't need that much. It's wasteful. And then it ends up poofing everywhere and making, you know, clouds, kind of puffy clouds of powder, and it's unnecessary. And I want to be as frugal as possible and use as little as possible. So this seems to work like this. Then I will take my tissue, oops, sorry about that, and just crumple it up to make a little puff. And then I just start puffing the cards. I'll often start with the card that I accidentally put the most on. And as you can see, I'm just spreading it in a light film. So I think you can see that there's a film on that now. All over each card. There's not much on that one, so if there's not much on one but there's a lot on another, I might just, you know, transfer one to the other. See, it's not difficult at all. I'm just putting, just spreading out a thin, it's definitely on there. I mean, if you touch it, I would feel it. The powder's coming off on my fingers. Okay, can you see there that I made this line through there? So there's definitely a fine coating of powder on each of these cards. You don't have to pick them up. I usually leave them where they are. I just wanted to kind of make it easier for you to see. Now once I've got a fine coating on, say, all the fronts, if I'm doing all the fronts, I then pick them up and lay them front to back. So I have not coated the back, but I'm going to place it on top of a card that has a fine coat already on it. So you see what I'm doing here? Okay. And then what I will do is put them into a bag. Oh, that's the other thing that you might need, some kind of a bag. Actually a cloth drawstring bag works really well, but I wanted to use a clear bag so you could kind of see what I was doing in here. And I don't zip the bag because you do want there to be a bit of airflow. I don't want it to be airtight because I want to be able to bend. I was not being rough in that bag. I muted the sound on that because it was just ridiculously loud. I didn't want to blow everybody's eardrums out. Whoops. See, yeah, this is what you should not have. Okay, so now that those particular cards are out of the bag, by smushing them around, by kind of, you know, moving them around and rubbing them up against one another in the bag, I transferred the excess powder from the fronts to the backs. So now the backs, I can feel, are quite coated. So what I'll do next is just take my clean cloth and wipe the fronts and the backs. Sometimes what I will do when they come out, if there's still some powder, especially for darker cards, I might do that on all four sides to knock some of the excess powder off. And then I'll just wipe front and back. Getting off any excess powder. You will feel it on your hands until you wash your hands. There may be some that still feel a tiny bit sticky. If they do, I would probably apply a bit more powder. Even just by wiping, the cloth will start to get lightly coated in the fanning powder with use, as will this. And so now you have cards that just will fan beautifully. It smooths the surface finely by placing that fine layer of powder on there. And you wouldn't want to use anything that was abrasive that might take away or wear the images or anything off the cards. Okay, so let me show you the second method if you want to use a kabuki brush. These are so sticky. I think I'll do these back up. And so then instead of scattering it the way I did earlier that way, I'll just put a bit of the kabuki brush in and get a little bit of powder on the bristles of the brush. You do not need a lot of this stuff. As I said, a little bit goes a long way. That's why I did a lot of experimenting to see how little I can get away with using. With this method, you can pick up a card, puff it like that. Here. If you want to do this one-handed, can be done like that as well. So when I use the brush, I don't really need to put them in the bag and smooth them around because I've already put a fine layer on the fronts and the backs. So I just go straight to wiping the excess off. Both methods seem to work pretty well. You'll want to experiment with what works best for you. You'll want to experiment how much with the amount of powder that you like or need, depending upon the stickiness of the card. Now, I've used fanning powder not just for sticky cards. For instance, I think it is my Devas of Creation deck that's quite matte, but it had a few areas on the surface that were rough to the touch. And it was a very matte paper kind of finish on those cards, and then a few of the surfaces were slightly rough to the touch. And so I decided to use fanning powder on those cards that had that slightly rough area so that they wouldn't they wouldn't potentially scratch the finish on any of the cards that they were next to when I was shuffling or whatever. So I've used them for cards that have rough spots as well as for sticky cards. Okay, so these are all the ones I've done so far. And you can see it's just a big difference from when they first started. The feel of them is much nicer. And that's it. It's really that easy. There's not much to it. You may even find some tricks that you like better. Again, as I say, make sure you're using good ventilation. My feeling is less is better than more. Too little is better than too much. You can always put more on. But once you've got it kind of clouding up, kicking up everywhere, and you're sneezing, and you kind of can't, you have to just wait until that settles and you run the vacuum. So I always say less is more because you can always do a card twice, or you could always do a whole deck twice if you had to while you were learning and experimenting. The first few decks I did this on were the Tarot of the She and the Messenger Oracle by Raven Phelan, because they're both very, very sticky, and they turned out beautifully. Just practice makes perfect. So if you have any questions, or if you have any really awesome thoughts and advice about fanning powder that you'd like to share with people, please feel free to leave that below. Again, if there's anything I didn't answer or wasn't clear enough about, please feel free to ask a question down below. So that's it. Quick tutorial on fanning powder for tarot and oracle cards. Take care. See you next time. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.